Welcome back to our continuing series of legislative candidate interviews brought to you by Bresnan Communications and the Montana Cable Television Association. Contesting for House District 98 are Will Deschamps, the Republican candidate, and Holly Razor, the Democratic candidate. And Holly Razor could not be with us this afternoon, but Will Deschamps is with us. Will, thank you for coming. I'd like to have you introduce yourself to our viewing audience and give them your background and maybe the rationale why you want to serve in the Montana House of Representatives and what you believe you bring to the table.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Will Deschamps, and I am the Republican candidate for House District 98. One of the reasons or some background on me is I was born and raised, or at least raised, on Mullen Road for all but 6 months of my life. I've been a taxpayer, a small businessman for over 35 years. I have a deep-seated interest in community service, lower taxes, smaller government, and I think that I'm a good alternative to the present incumbent.
Will, if you're elected, the first and foremost overarching theme of this is going to be, I guess, something that you don't get to deal with every day, which is a surplus, and one that seems to be growing every time it's estimated. It's just recently they've upped the projections from $550 million to $750 million, actually $900 million, but minus the reserves they'd like to keep at $750 million. As you know, there are competing plans. The Republican plan is called the Handshake with Montana, and the Democrats' plan is called the Square Deal for Montana. They have similar features and they have varying features. Do you endorse either one of those in total, or do you have your own thoughts of how we deal with the welcome problem of a surplus?
Well, we are indeed fortunate that we do have a surplus. I do not embrace a plan that selectively picks people that will receive property tax rebates. I think if someone pays property taxes, they certainly should share in part of that refund. So I do endorse the Handshake with Montana.
Which is the Republican
Which
plan?
is the Republican offer of permanently reducing property taxes by 8%. Under the current administration's plan, I question the businesses, both large and small, are going to be left out. The question that bears asking is, what about that young lady on the corner that has decided to become a business and have a child care business out of her home? Is she considered a property taxpayer, or is she considered a small business owner? Either way, she should be treated as fairly as anybody else would be on the rebate. Now, that being said, there are other things that need to be addressed with that surplus. Number one, we have a $1.4 billion, $1.2 to $1.4 billion deficit in the teacher or the PERS, which is Public Employees Retirement System. We have a $14 and now lately I think they say $15 million proposed deficit in the old fund. Both of these deficits were caused by past legislative action, and that sort of thing is going to have to be addressed, and unfortunately it's going to be placed upon, it sounds like, the taxpayers. Another thing is the education, which has been ongoing for years.
You are skipping right over the subjects we were going to talk about here. Go ahead. We do have a problem that was enunciated by the Montana Supreme Court that said that we inadequately fund education and that our system is flawed. The last legislature addressed that problem with an $80 million one-time infusion in the regular session and a $37 million infusion in the subsequent special session. Some feel that the problem, as enunciated by the court, has been addressed. Others feel that we've just begun. What's your general feeling about what we've done on K through 12 education funding and where we need to go, if anywhere?
Well, I've spent 9 years on the Hellgate Elementary School Board. So I've seen what can happen from state and federal mandates that don't allow or assess money to districts to live up to certain mandates that either the federal or state government make on them. We obviously have a problem. We have a decrease in enrollment, and yet school districts still have ongoing fixed costs in buildings, maintenance, and in a lot of cases, their largest portion of their budget is labor, and that's mainly our teachers. And obviously, they need to be well paid. The problem is, that, as I see the school funding formula, the problem is that you have school districts in eastern Montana that are 1-room, 2-room, 3-room schools that when there is a check written to OPI that is distributed to all districts across the state, they get such a minuscule amount that it doesn't help them to offer what the state constitution mandates. And I can't paraphrase it exactly, but it goes something like this, that the state guarantees to offer equal opportunity of education to every person. Now, a school district in Hysham or Glendive cannot offer the same educational opportunities to their students that a school district like Missoula School District Number 1, Kalispell, Billings, Butte, or Great Falls, or Helena. And therein lies the problem, in my mind, about the school funding formula.
And how would you address that specifically? Do you have ideas? Are there ideas floating around out there that you endorse that seem proportional to you to address what you've described as a flawed system?
Well, first of all, we have to determine what this formula is that OPI uses. I certainly have the school funding formulas in this state are so convoluted, there aren't very many people in the state that I believe truly understand them. But somehow or another, we have to readjust the proportion of money that goes to larger districts versus the smaller districts. And I do believe that once those smaller districts have enough money to adequately offer an educational opportunity to their residents, then we'll be in balance and we should have very little trouble with the courts. We just can't continue to forget about these smaller school districts. When a school district like Number 1 got $4 million, I believe, out of the last session, we have school districts in eastern Montana that got $16,000. And if they were capped or had some other restrictions, they got less than that. That might pay their utility bills for a month and a half. And therein lies the problem in my mind.
Before we leave the subject of money, which is always the prevalent subject at the legislature, what about the cry that comes from all corners, even despite the surplus that we have now, for quote-unquote comprehensive tax reform? That has never been defined, and for each person it's a different animal. Some people believe it's sales tax, some people believe it's a value-added tax, some people believe it's local option taxes. Speaking of your philosophy of taxes in general, and whether you think any that are currently on the books in Montana need to be reduced, thrown out, revamped, or increased?
Well, I'm one that believes that government should only do that which the individual can't do for themselves. And it's odd this year that with a possible $750 million surplus that we're talking about tax reform, I believe that taxes ought to be lower, and I believe that some of this tax money ought to be returned to the people that paid it. Comprehensive tax reform, I don't know what that means either, because everybody at the table, sitting around the table in Helena, is going to be pawing at this $750 million, and legislators are going to have to make the decision of who gets what and how much. And I don't have any good answers for comprehensive tax reform, other than the people obviously are paying too high taxes, or we wouldn't have 4 years in a row of surplus. $300 million 2 years ago, projected $750 million this year.
Would you spend any of the money, as some publications, particularly in the Missoula area, have editorialized in support of using some of the money to buy from private landowners, particularly big landholders, particularly sensitive areas, scenic areas, and areas that would guarantee public access. There have been some proposals to take part of that surplus and buy some of the timberlands that now are worth more as development properties for their owners than they are as timberlands. Would you support using any of the surplus for that?
I'd support the use of surplus of purchasing other properties if an agreeable deal can be made between the landowner and the state. I don't espouse to the concept that eminent domain be used to force somebody to divest themselves of their property. The market forces should drive that, and if the taxpayers of this state decide by the words or messages to their legislators that they want some of this property paid or bought or purchased, then I don't see a problem with that. But I think first of all, with the surplus, we need to take care of those problems that were caused by prior legislation and those problems that crop up from time to time, as with the Department of Corrections and Department of Health and Human Services, that need to be covered.
Will, we've kind of covered some of the general areas that are on my sheet here. Obviously, if you want to go to this legislature and are working hard to get there, you've got particular issues that are probably more specific than I've covered. What would be your top three?
My top three are obviously the surplus. Number two, the education. And number three would be Jessica's Law. Some way of enforcing stricter laws, like Florida has in the past, to keep sexual predators away from our children. This may be because of activist judges that's driving this. In some cases it is. But we need to protect our children because those are the true treasures of the state of Montana.
Will, speak to for a second, if you will, about, I assume being from Missoula, I shouldn't assume this, the governor has proposed that there be a tuition freeze. I believe it would cost $50 million, again from the surplus, a tuition freeze for a period of years for students, I believe in-state students, tuitions in our university systems. Would you support the use of that money for that purpose?
I would support the use of some of the surplus for that purpose, but I'd go a step further. I would like to see a tax or a tuition reduction for our students. I would like also for our veterans to have better access to higher education. Last session there was a bill that was voted down that would have allowed OPI to give tuition waivers to veterans, and it was voted down, I believe, on party lines. Those are some of the things that need to be done in our education. But more importantly, I'd like to see some of that surplus go into higher education in the form of targeting it for R&D purposes. I'd like for us to try and attract the brightest people in the science and technology fields and attract them here to the university, and with them generally comes grant money. That grant money can help fund their research, pay good paying jobs to people that work for them, and in a lot of cases there are spin-off companies from either of those sectors that come from this research that will pay good paying jobs to people that want to live in Montana.
Will, I've been conducting these interviews through the week, and we have a real wealth of talented, committed people running for these. In your case, you're running against an incumbent. When the person walks in the booth and has the two names lined up next to each other, and we'll close with this because it'd be a good way for you to close and define yourself. Ultimately, what distinguishes you from your opponent to the point where the voter would be advised to vote for you instead of your opponent, Ms. Razor?
Well, those are easy questions to run to answer because that's some of the reasons that I'm running. Number one, My opponent has voted for nearly every tax increase since 2001, 2003, and 2005. In 2003, the state was facing a 2003, the state was facing a $300 million deficit. My opponent voted for over $1 million in increased taxes that year in one bill. Last year, there were several bills that were voted on to raise taxes. Fortunately, the Republican side of the aisle was able to mitigate some of those. Number two, I am pro-family, I am anti-abortion, and I'm not afraid or concerned about making those statements. My opponent has some votes that go against some of those values that I hold dear. And number three is I'm a United States Marine Corps veteran. And I have found bills that my opponent has voted against veterans. And one of them had to do with the tuition waivers, giving the Board of Regents, I believe. I misspoke earlier. I said the OPI. I believe it's the Board of Regents that we're looking for, or would have been given the opportunity to allow waivers for veterans that wanted to continue on in higher education. So those are three pretty good issues that stick in my mind as to why you should vote for me, Will Deschamps. That's Republican for House District 98.
Folks, thank you for tuning in. Will, thank you for joining us. I know you'll give careful deliberation, viewers, to your voting choices, as you always do. But please keep in mind that it's all for naught. Viewing this program was for nothing. Thinking, reading the paper, worrying about it, deciding who you like best and what stance that they take persuades you to vote one way or the other is all for naught. If you don't, go to the polling place and vote. It's such a privilege we have in this country. On behalf of Bresnan Communications, Montana Cable Television Association, we urge you to vote. Thank you.